So, GTA San Andreas. Game I first played when I was around 14. I loved this game when I was that age. I'd never played a proper AAA title before, and it blew my mind. Gang violence, corrupt cops, drug wars, betrayal, broken families, government agents, and much, much more. It was a game that tried to do so much, and even to this day, the side content and missions I haven't got around to playing yet. Me and my friends would talk about missions all the time and quote phrases for it years afterwards. I'll go over some of the story beats here, but don't worry, we're only covering the start of the game, so there'll be no spoilers. So we meet CJ, a former Grove Street gang member, who's come home to bury his mum after he finds out she's been killed in a drive-by shooting. He's been away in Vice City for 5 years, and there are a few reasons CJ left Los Santos in the first place. One is the gang wars, and two is that CJ was unable to cope after his younger brother's death, although we're never given a reason of how his younger brother did die. We see him in a taxi on his way home from the airport when CJ is met by some of those issues he left Los Santos for in the first place. These corrupt cops pick CJ up and immediately arrest him. CJ has come straight from the airport, but they suggest he's already been involved in a shooting that happened a few blocks away. They threaten CJ with this just to let him know. Even though he has been away for 5 years, there's a pecking order, and CJ is still at the bottom. After the car journey, CJ is thrown out into enemy gang territory. He has to find his way back home, and this is where we start the game. CJ then meets up with his brother and sister and a few of his old friends. They're all facing some major issues. He decides after seeing the scope of the trouble, he's going to help turn things around. And that's the premise of GTA San Andreas. This game has scale, it's massive for a PS2 game. I remember getting in the car and just driving around for like 2 hours when I was younger. I thought the map just wouldn't end. Again, looking back, the map is actually quite modest in size, but the design that has gone into each area makes each area feel very unique. Grove Street looks and feels like a gang-run neighbourhood. The whole area here is based on some rundown areas down in LA, and the realism really comes through well here. Verona Beach looks like a singles oasis, full of what look like hotel-sized apartments and parties on the beach. Angel Pines is an area I can only describe as the South turned it to 1000%. It was amazing when I first got there as a kid. I literally thought I had changed the game somehow and put a different disc in my PS2 halfway through a loading screen. The big city of San Fierro shows a more civilized and busy business area, similar to San Francisco, from the hills you can drive up and down to the shipyard and the airport. Although the area is in a smaller space, it expands vertically and it makes it feel like a very massive and bustling city. The last island is Las Venturas. It's Las Vegas in a massive desert. The feeling you get from the desert of the vastness there and the feeling of fun and scale you get to in the city all makes it very believable. Also, there's an Area 51 in this game. Yes, really, where you can get a jetpack later on. The point I'm making though is that even though it's a big area, it feels polished. Whenever I am in a certain area, I can feel the environmental storytelling showing me what kind of area it is. I feel this is something a lot of games don't get right, but San Andreas nails it. The graphics and fonts in the menus are all full of swagger and again, scream gangster. The HUD is pretty clean and works well, for the most part. I'm not really a fan of the scrolling items method of selecting a weapon. I often find myself frantically trying to switch to the gun I wanted only to go past it and have to go back again. I found they really nailed it in GTA 5, but again, for San Andreas, this is all perfectly usable. The graphics as well, compared to nowadays, they're nothing amazing, but they do the job. With a game over 14 years old, they're not offensive, and again, you have to think of the game's scale. There were gonna be sacrifices, and I think they pulled off a good balance here. Oh my god, the music. If there's anything that defines this game, it's the music. It captures the late 80s and early 90s perfectly. There isn't any background music in the game, but it has radio stations. It's something they've used in past games as well. And it's a great way to make you hear the music in an organic way and make you really embrace the era the game is based in. There's an amazing selection of songs here across 11 different radio stations, and they all serve to create a different atmosphere. From Los Santos with its gangster rap, K-Rose with its country and folk music, to K-Dust with its classic rock. My personal favourite was a talk show radio called WCTR. The radio host was a chap called Laszlo. Even if you don't end up playing the game, I think it's worth listening to on YouTube. It's amazing to see some of the Rockstar writing staff just flex their comedy writing muscles with the radio stations and their adverts. The radio hosts would even talk about things that happened in this story, say if an important character dies or something big happens that affects the in-game world. To cut to the chase, there was nothing better than driving through your hood and listening to Tupac and Snoop Dogg, driving a tractor through Angel Pines to All My Exes Live in Texas, and flying over the desert to a classic like Freebird. The music is amazing, and it's something you really do miss when you're not in a vehicle or have access to the radio. Considering most missions in this game revolve around a big drive or fly, it really does help make something that shouldn't be fun, fun. Rockstar was not messing around with voice talent. Samuel L. Jackson, Ice-T, James Woods, Danny Dyer, Axl Rose, yes, from Guns N' Roses, that Axl Rose. They wanted this game to be full of acting and voice talent. This game, as I said before, was a AAA production, and the evidence was right down from the random voices of NPCs through to the main voice cast and the DJs you'd hear on the radio. I always liked the voice actors in this game, but it was only when I got a little bit older and had more access to the internet that I bothered to give them a Google search and found out who they actually were, and it makes so much more sense now. It's something that even this many years on still holds up, and it's rare to hear a voice line read poorly. The story. In theory, it was epic, amazing, and it made complete sense. But this is where the cracks of such a big game do start to show. Again, I won't go into too much details or specifics, but there tends to be a few trends throughout the game that bothered me growing up, and especially playing it through again recently. The story does, most of the time, flow well, but there are a few things CJ does without any questions or enough reasoning to do so. The one that stands out the most is a mission early on, where CJ literally robs a military base with Ryder. Even to this day, it seems way too stupid to agree to, and watching it back, Ryder doesn't even do a good job of convincing me it's a good idea. CJ has been back maybe a week when this mission is suggested, and all CJ does to prevent it is he mentions a couple of jokes, and then they go rob a military base. These are minor gripes, but over the game, we do see this happen often enough that it stands out. Towards the end of the game, this issue did solve itself. The scale of the missions gets bigger, the risk becomes more and more, and as the game goes on, you get access to different vehicles, weapons, and your allies increase. This means the crazy missions I thought were mad in the early game become a lot more doable later on, but sometimes it just seemed a little ridiculous. I only bring this up as for me, the game is trying to be grounded and believable most of the time, and it just tends to break the immersion. It was more like a Mission Impossible game at times than it was about gang wars and family. You might disagree, but for me, it just broke the immersion too often. All the characters in this game are either good, funny, or amazing. Again, I won't spoil anything for you, but if you do choose to play this game, the characters are a strong part of this, and it does not leave you disappointed. The writing does a good job of making all the dialogue between the characters seem believable and natural, and the voice acting shines through again, making sure every important story beat is delivered really well. In summary, I've got little complaints about the story. It is an interesting story and it's got tons of variety in there. It has some twists and turns that I was generally surprised by, and it does tell an interesting story of CJ growing as a character. Let's go over the controls. The game came out in 2008, so it's showing its age a little here. It came out a few years before games like Call of Duty and some racing games really standardised how a controller would be used. Things like shooting and driving are sort of placed all over the place. There are some trigger options here for your shooting, but most of the time I found it easier to actually hit circle just due to how your character moved. I did have some issues with the first person shooting mode as well. It removed any movement from your character, so you wouldn't be able to strafe any direction. You could only aim straight forward or look left, right, up and down. It would sometimes confuse me when I'd enter first person shooting mode, only to try strafe to the left or right, just to turn a full 90 degrees and look the other way. Admittedly, it probably really confused the enemy, but it was something I was still trying to get used to right towards the end of the game. Okay, so this is where the review is going to take a little bit of a dive. For clarity, I played the game on the standard PS4. I downloaded the San Andreas game from the PS4 store on the 28th of June 2018, and it had the latest patch installed on it, and I would check for updates when trying to play the game. No other patches have been added to the game, and as the game was launched quite a while ago, I don't think any more are going to come out soon. Interesting fact, the PS4 version is not the same HD remake that came to the PS3 and Xbox 360. The PS3 and Xbox 360 versions were like classic remasters, the ones where you just take the original game, dial up the graphics slightly and up the frame rate if you can. You know, what you expect from a normal HD remake. However, the PS4 version is, and I have no idea why, the original PS2 game, emulated on the PS4, and it suffers for it massively. What this means is the PS4 is now wasting resources trying to emulate a console that is now emulating a game being played on the PS4. There are many reasons you do not want to do this, and I'll explain why. The frames drop constantly, whether you're just walking around or driving down the motorway. The audio would sometimes crackle during gameplay, and occasionally I'd hear this strange, high-pitched ringing noise. For no reason, I couldn't figure out why this was happening. The only thing I noticed about it is that it would not happen in cutscenes. So at least that's a good thing? This really did damage my ability to play and enjoy the game. There were so many occasions when it would just break my immersion, from simply skipping frames while walking around Los Santos, to causing my car to crash and missing enemies they ran past me, just as the game tried to catch up to what was going on screen. The performance of this game is its biggest downfall. I had it running smoother on my old Samsung S7 when I had the mobile version on it a few years ago. Even with the reduced draw distance, it still played better. I swear to God, I actually think Bethesda made this port. The bugs are so game-breaking, I'd consider it a win when I made it to the mission, let alone started it or tried to complete it. I also found that when I had 2 stars, they just wouldn't go away. I was unsure if this was a bug just with my version of the game, but the only way I'd get rid of it was to either go through a paint and spray, find a star to reduce the overall stars on the map, dying, or by getting 3 stars. Because you know, if you can't beat them, just shoot more people. This, along with other bugs I mentioned, made simple things very time consuming. It made me really have to plan ahead, with cornering in the car, shooting enemies, just running around in a mission. This is why it hurt the game so much. The gameplay is very arcadey. It wants you to shoot up the world, drive cars like a madman. But you can't do that, as you don't feel you're in full control of your character. It made me play the game very safe, much more strategic than I would normally have played it. And that's not how this game is meant to be played. I'm not saying you can't be smart when you play the game, I'm just saying it's not the way to have fun in this game. The missions can range from extremely annoying to epic, but I'm happy to say they do stay more towards the epic side. I didn't realise, for example, until my last playthrough, that the heist idea we see in GTA 5 happened all the way back in San Andreas. These are made up of smaller missions. They involve things like blowing things up, stealing a few vehicles, and dating a lady. But due to the excellent storytelling around these missions, you do feel like it mattered, and it was important to the heist you do end up pulling off. The missions throughout the game are generally enjoyable, and even if the task seems boring, usually the writing, the voice acting, or the music comes in to add flavour and entertainment to whatever you're doing. I do though have some issues with some missions in the game, and it's mostly to do with the driving. I feel like the cars at the start of the game all behave like they're desperately trying to drive into the nearest wall or another car. You can increase your car skill, and this makes the cars less likely to skid and fly off the road by driving for long periods or by attending driving school. My only issue is, why? Why should I have to endure terrible driving controls until I've completed some mini-game first? I understand it definitely adds value to these mini-games in general, but you can't even do these till around 5 hours into the game. It just makes all the missions up to that point a lot more difficult, and the first part of the game lasts a lot longer than it should do. The game is trying to make it feel like you've progressed in skill, and by the end of the game you feel like you can drive like that dude in Wheelman. But it all just feels like padding. If you don't know what padding is, it's when a game makes something either last longer than it needs to be, or makes you repeat an activity with the only intention to drag the length of the game out. While I was driving around, I would constantly hit cops and other gang members, my own gang members, pedestrians, other cars, really anything I could hit and my car would drift towards them. This would happen during missions. It'd make me have to switch cars mid-mission, as well as start gang wars I didn't want to start, or even have a war with the police. My only choices were to either drive very slowly, or drive with my foot to the floor and just hope for the best. Due to the laggy inputs as well, and the frame skips on the PS4 version, it really amplified these issues for me. The biggest case for padding is towards the end of the game. With around 3 missions left to go, you'll unlock a mode in the game which allows you to take over territories. You see these rectangles of yellow, purple and green appear on your map, and they represent different gangs in Los Santos. To take over an area, you must kill 3 or 4 gang members of an opposing gang, and a gang war will start. NPCs will stop appearing around you, and you'll have to defeat 3 waves of gang members. If you survive all 3, you win the territory. The area turns green, and you even get a little money coming in to your house in Los Santos. You're required to take over around a third of them before you're allowed to start the last mission of the game. Sounds easy, right? Well, the issue lies with 2 things. 1, the gang members do not spawn. And 2, the AI's pathfinding. So the first one's easy, the gang members don't spawn. You can occasionally find a few on a street corner and you think, great, I'll kill them and here we go. You'll start shooting them, and the police will immediately start shooting at you. They can appear out of nowhere, and at this point you have to desperately start fighting and killing gang members to try start a gang war before you get 2 stars. At that point, you've just got 2 stars forever, according to the game's logic. Your only option is to try kill everyone there, or you're going to have to go back to CJ's house and reload a save. The second issue is with the AI's pathfinding. They'll have to walk across a road right in front of you before they're allowed to turn and shoot. It's just a little disappointing. After all the build-up of starting a gang war, and all the time it takes to get there, they'll just run in front of you, and you can just mow them down before they even turn and shoot you. It makes this part of the game last so long, and I can't look at this part of the game and call it anything else but padding. If they gave you this task 10 to 15 missions before the end of the game, then you could do 1 or 2 of these in between missions. It would help break the game up and make it feel a lot more rewarding when you take over these territories. But because they give you this only a few missions before the end of the game, it's something you're going to have to grind through, and it becomes very boring very quickly. It's just the same structure, rinse and repeat. The worst thing is that you can't even just do it. Sometimes you have to wait for more gang members to spawn, other times you'll have issues with the police, and you can't even get through it. It's something that makes the end of this game end on such a sour note, considering how much of a good game it has been up to that point. My overall thoughts on the game have changed a lot from when I was younger. The story I think holds up well. It's just a shame that the end of the game can become quite grindy. It's a very PS2 kind of game, but it is probably one of the best PS2 games ever made. It just suffers from a few elements of aging control schemes and a few poor gameplay designs with things like padding. These are things though to be expected of a game that is 14 years old, and these happened a lot for the big games at the time. If you think this game sounds great, fantastic, play it. I can't recommend and actively deter anyone from playing the PS4 version though. I don't know why Sony or Rockstar decided to remake the game this way, but it was a terrible decision. The resources are clearly straining the PS4 way more than they should do, and it comes out of a very choppy, bad experience. The PS4 version of the game, I would give a 6 out of 10 to. Annoyingly, I think if I played on any other console, I would have a completely different experience and score in this game. But unfortunately, the PS4 version is the one I bought, and that's the one I reviewed.